واجعل يا رب رزقك لي واسعا ومطلبه سهلا ومأخذه قريبا، ولا تعنني بطلب ما لم تقدر لي فيه رزقا، فإنك غني عن عذابي وأنا فقير إلى رحمتك. فصل على محمد وآله وجد على عبدك بفضلك إنك ذو فضل عظيم. صلوات. صل على محمد.
Mu'mineen, the ziyarat will be recited after the program ends, inshallah. Par Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salawat.
اور محمد وآل محمد صلوات. اللہم صلی علی محمد وآل محمد. اعوذ باللہ من الشیطان الرجیم. بسم اللہ الرحمن الرحیم. العادیات صبحا فالموریات عدھا فالمغیرات صبحا فعصرن به نقعا ووسطنا به جمعا ان الانسان لربه لکنود وانه على ذلك لشهيد وانه ليحب الخير لشديد افلا يعلم اذا بعثر ما في القبور وحصل ما في الصدور إن ربهم بهم يومئذ للخبير. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. اللهم صل على محمد.
Par Muhammad wa ali Muhammad, salawat. Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra, Ya Zahra. Ae meri bibi, اے میری بی بی تیرے در پہ استغاثہ ہے، تیرا ممنون میری شہزادی یہ جہاں سارا ہے. یا زہرا یا زہرا تو ہمیں حفظ اور امان دے دے، اپنی چادر کا سائباں دے دے، تیری قدرت میں کیا نہیں بی بی، تو جسے چاہے دو جہاں دے دے، یا زہرا یا زہرا، اے میری بی بی، اے میری بی بی، آنسوؤں میں دعا مانگی ہے، تیری تسبیح پڑھ کے دل نے تجھے پکارا ہے، یا زہرا یا زہرا، تیرا دربار وہ سخی در ہے، ہر فرشتہ جہاں گداگر ہے، تیرے مقروض آسماں والے، تیرا مقروض ہر سکندر ہے، یا زہرا یا زہرا، اے میری بی بی، اے میری بی بی، تو سخی ہے تیرے بچے بھی ایک راہی نہیں، گواہی میں جگ یہ سارا ہے، یا زہرا یا زہرا، اے میری بی بی، اے میری بی بی، تیرے بچوں کا غم مناتے ہیں، اپنی اولاد سے کہیں بڑھ کے غم یہ پیارا ہے، یا زہرا یا زہرا، فرش مجلس پہ اور مصلی پر ہر جواں کہہ رہا ہے رو رو کر، ہم رہیں نہ رہیں مگر بی بی، تا قیامت رہے غم سرور، یا زہرا یا زہرا، قرض مقروض کے ادا کر دے، مفلسوں کا نصیب وا کر دے، جن کی گودی بھری نہیں بی بی، ان کو اولاد تو عطا کر دے، یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا یا زہرا، محمد و آل محمد صلوات۔ Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Respected scholar, elders, brothers and sisters in faith, Assalamu alaikum. My condolences to all mu'mineen on this very sad occasion. May Imam Zamana Ajjalallahu Ta'ala Farajahu, Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad, accept our condolences. Shortly, the Sheikh will ascend the member, but a few announcements before that. CFK has arranged COVID-19 vaccination, booster, and flu shot drive for tomorrow, inshallah, at 11 a.m. The deadline to register is today, so please do so if you're interested. There is a Dallas Youth Alumni event, Coffee and Donuts with Sheikh, this Sunday at 3 p.m., which is open to brothers and sisters ages 18 through 28. We also have a Scouts 1499 event, the Family Movie Night, coming Friday, January 14th at 6 p.m., which is free for Scouts and open to all Mu'mineen. We also have a CFK arranged event, Chai with Sheikh Mahdi. This is an event organized and the topic for this event is interacting with non-mahrams in the professional world. This program is open for brothers and sisters ages 30 and above. With the uptick of COVID-19 cases due to the Omicron variant, we request the community to continue observing safety protocols. Please wear masks, practice social distancing, and continue the use of hand sanitizers when attending all in-person programs. Jazakallah. Jazakallah to all our sustaining members, donors, volunteers, program sponsors for your contributions that help CFK's vision come to fruition, enabling us to serve the community's social and religious needs. For information on how to become a sustaining member, please contact our membership director, Brother Asif Patel. For opportunities to donate and sponsor programs, please join the CFK WhatsApp group or visit cfkdfw.org, where you will also find details of all the programs that I just mentioned previously. We are always looking for volunteers who can help behind the scenes, brothers and sisters who are interested in reciting poetry, nahas. For those who are willing to help out here for opening the center, please contact me, Brother Mazhar Abbas, Brother Asad Jafri, or any of the existing volunteers, inshallah. Let us now recite a Surah Fatiha and 3 times Surah Ikhlas for the marhumin of tonight's sponsors. Marhuma Muhaddisa Khatun, daughter of Sayyid Ghulam Mahdi, and the marhumin of Brother Asad Jafri and family. The marhumin of Brother Naeem, Sister Aisha and Asiya and family. The marhumin of Brother Salman Hussain, Sister Sakina Jafri and family. The marhumin of Sayyid Akbar, Sister Safia and family. All our marhumin and the marhumin of the Ummah. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin. إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. I would like to request the Sheikh to please ascend to the member. Ba'awaz buland salawat.
Recite salawat, please. One more salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيب قلوبنا والشفيع ذنوبنا وطبيب نفوسنا أبي القاسم محمد اللهم صل على وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين واللعنة الدائم على أعدائهم أجمعين أما بعد فقد قال الله الحكيم في محكم كتابه الكريم أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم والذين اجتنبوا الطاغوت أن يعبدوها وأنابوا إلى الله لهم البشرى فبشر عباد صدق الله العلي العظيم صلوات الله صلى على محمد وآل محمد وعجل فرجهم. For the love of our beloved Prophet and his beloved progeny, please recite a second loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajam. For the hastening in the return of our beloved 12th Imam, a third final loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. I begin tonight by offering my condolences on the shahada of our beloved mother, Lady Fatimiyyah Zahra, salawatullahi wa salamuhu alayha, salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajahum. And of course, the topic that we will be discussing tonight and tomorrow night is the topic of the biographies and the lives of two of the most well-known Sahaba of the Prophet. Two of the Sahaba of the Prophet who are very much tied to these days and nights that we are going through, these days and nights of Fatimiyyah, because as much as they were known as the Sahaba of the Prophet, they are also known as the supporters of our beloved Imam and Lady Fatimiyyah Zahra during these critical moments and days after the demise of our beloved Prophet. Salawatullahi wa salamu alayhim ajma'een. Another salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. And in order to get into this topic, I want to take a couple steps back and approach the topic from this perspective. The issue of the status of the Sahaba and the way that the two schools of thought within Islam look at this issue is, of course, a matter of dispute. And in many ways, it lies at the very core of the differences between the different schools of thought within Islam. The way you look at the Sahaba of the Prophet in many ways will dictate the way you understand Islam. And Fatimiyyah is closely tied to this issue. Because if you look at Fatimiyyah from the perspective that the Shi'i school of thought looks at it, well, that you will have one perspective when it comes to the status of the Sahaba. You will have one understanding as it relates to who were these Sahaba and what do we think of them. And if you have the Sunni understanding of what happened during these days and nights, or what didn't happen rather, then you will have a different understanding of how you look at the individuals who are in power and had these positions at that time. And so every time we go through Fatimiyyah, it is a reminder of how this question comes up every time. How do you look at the Sahaba of the Prophet? And depending on your understanding of history, you might look at them and hold them very high in respect and honor, or you might look at them and believe that in some ways they disobeyed the Prophet and went against his message. And so this lies at the very core of Fatimiyyah. Fatimiyyah every year is a reminder of the dispute that the schools of thought have when it comes to the status of the Sahaba. And on both sides, on both schools of thought, you will find major misunderstandings, major misconceptions about what the other school of thought believes as it relates to the Sahaba. On the Shia school of thought, we have our own shortcomings. I'm going to be talking about that tonight a little bit. On the Sunni side, you also have certain shortcomings. There are people who will assume that you, as a follower of the Shia school of thought, do not respect any of the Sahaba, or that you might disrespect most of the Sahaba, and that you believe that the moment the Prophet left this world, all of a sudden everyone who beforehand had said the Shahadatain and believed in this religion, now all of a sudden abandoned his message and abandoned his religion, whereas that is not necessarily the position that we hold within our school of thought. So tonight, inshallah, and tomorrow night, we want to take some time to delve into this issue of the Sahaba of the Prophet and also into the life of these two Sahaba of the Prophet, and that is none but Abudhar and Salman. And we will do so by posing the following questions. Number one, what is the Shi'i and Sunni perspective as it relates to the status of the Sahaba of the Prophet? Number two, what similarities do we find between the character, the life, the legacy of Abudhar and the life and legacy of Salman, and the way they carried themselves and the way they did things? Number three, how did Abudhar embrace Islam? How did he become a Muslim? And what is the story behind that? Number four, what was his relationship like with the Prophet? How much affection did the Prophet used to show to Abudhar? And what was his relationship like with the Ahlul Bayt? Number five, which of the Sahaba was there that though he had spent time with the Prophet and though he was considered amongst those who embraced Islam, he was amongst those who exiled Abudhar and sent Abudhar and forced Abudhar to live alone and forbid others to even come and bid farewell when Abudhar was leaving Medina? And number six, what lessons can you and I learn from the life and legacy of Abudhar that we can implement into our day-to-day lives? Tonight, inshallah, we will delve into these 6 questions with a loud salawat ala Muhammadin wa ali Muhammad. Allow me to begin from here. The different perspectives that these two schools of thought have as it relates to the Sahaba lies at the very core of the dispute of these two schools of thought. If you and I sit back and we say what these khulafa did and what this person did, though he was a Sahabi of the Prophet, does not hold any legitimacy in my eyes. If he appointed this person as the caliph, if he appointed a council to choose the caliph, you and I look at these events and we say none of this holds any legitimacy for you and I. Why? Because you don't put the Sahaba at that level. It is because of the perspective you have as it relates to what role Sahaba play, that when a Sahabi, when a companion of the Prophet does something, you may not necessarily give legitimacy to it. You might say, well, this is what the Sahaba of the Prophet did. It doesn't mean it was right. It doesn't mean it was wrong. We have to see whether it was right or it was wrong. In the Sunni school of thought, however, the discussion is very different. The Sunni school of thought, the perspective on the Sahaba is that the Sahaba are held very, very high. And there is this concept known as idalatus Sahaba. Idalatus Sahaba does not mean that these Sahaba, that they don't make any mistakes, that they don't make any sins. No, history speaks very well of Sahaba who committed many sins. Many of them committed major sins. There's no doubt about that. But their understanding is that at the end of the day, they have a stamp of approval. So if he made a mistake, if he committed a sin, at the end of the day, you can't say he's a bad person. At the end of the day, you cannot say he has evil intentions. At the end of the day, you can't say he went against Islam at its roots. No, maybe he thought this is what needs to be done. Maybe he thought that's what needs to be done. And these Sahaba had differences of opinion amongst one another, and so they differed with one another. But at the end of the day, they have a stamp of approval. Why? Because they are Sahabi. Who is a Sahabi? There is dispute. How do you even define what a Sahabi is? The common definition is someone who met the Prophet, he spent time with the Prophet, and he left this world while he was still Muslim. Many times within our school of thought, there are brothers and sisters, how could you say Sahabi? All of them have this stamp of approval. Look, the Quran is talking about munafiqun. And other schools of thought will tell you, this is not who we refer to as a Sahabi. We mean a person who entered into Islam and did not give up his faith like a munafiq. Yes, there were many munafiqun. These munafiqun are not considered Sahabi based on this definition, because this person left this world without having his faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and in the Prophet. These are the Sahaba. They have a stamp of approval. And one of the other misunderstandings that we have within the Shi'i school of thought is this, that many assume that in the Sunni school of thought, this stamp of approval is given to the Sahaba simply because they spent time with the Prophet. Pay attention, this is a very delicate point. Very delicate point. Many assume that within the Sunni school of thought, this stamp of approval is given to them because they were around the Prophet. They spent time with the Prophet. Whereas the reason that is being proposed, at least, we may not agree with this reasoning, yes, but the reason that is being proposed is that the Prophet himself and the verses of the Quran gave them this stamp of approval. It's very different when you say a Sahabi has a stamp of approval because he was around the Prophet, versus you say that the Prophet himself said, whoever was around me, whoever spent time with me, my ashab have this stamp of approval. Again, we might disagree with the reasoning on the other side, but the reasoning is not that just because you spent time with someone, you have a stamp of approval. No, that's not the reasoning. That is a oversimplification that happens on our side many times. They say, well, you just spent time with the Prophet. What does that mean? This person says it doesn't mean anything. But when the Prophet himself, and again, we disagree with this, but if the Prophet himself were to give this stamp of approval, and if he himself were to say, my ashab are like the stars in the skies, whichever of them you want to follow, you will be guided, well, then the Prophet himself is giving them what? He's giving them a stamp of approval. Therefore, this is the misunderstanding, some of the misunderstandings we have on our side as it relates to the opinion of other schools of thought. Then you move to the other side. Within the Shia school of thought, no. In the Shia school of thought, these Sahaba are neither good nor bad. Just depends. We categorize them. Some of them are amongst the best people who came. Some of them we might consider the worst people who came. Doesn't matter. At the end of the day, just because you're a Sahabi, it's not a stamp of approval. And when the Prophet says, my ashab are this, my ashab are that, he's talking about those true ashab, talking about his true companions. The Shia school of thought will tell you it's not about the one who followed the Prophet around, who spent time with the Prophet. It's about the one who actually followed the teachings of the Prophet. He is the true Sahabi of the Prophet. In our school of thought, we believe there's a difference between following someone and following someone around. These two are different from one another. You can follow someone around, but it doesn't mean you're really following this person. And then whenever the Prophet says, my ashab are like this, my ashab are like that, the verses of the Quran say, those of the believers who are with this Prophet, they are this, they are that. It is referring to those true believers. Yes, those true believers, we hold them in a very high regard, in a very high respect. And the Quran has done this. The Quran says what? In verse 29 of Surah Al-Fath, the Quran says, Muhammadun Rasulullah. Recite salawat, please. It says Muhammadun Rasulullah walladhina ma'ahu ashidda'u 'ala al-kuffar ruhama'u baynahum. The Quran is praising the Sahaba of the Prophet, saying those who are with the Prophet, they are such. When they are amongst themselves, they're soft and lenient. When it comes to the enemies of God, ashidda. They are firm when they need to be firm. They're soft and, convenient and lenient when they have to be. This is the best praise. And then the verse of the Quran continues, says, Tarahum ruk'an sujjada. You will see them. They are constantly in ruku. They are constantly in sujud. Who is this verse praising? It's praising the true followers of the Prophet. Praising the Sahaba of the Prophet. تراهم ركعا سجدا يبتغون فضلا من الله ورضوانا سيماهم في وجوههم من أثر السجود. When you look upon them on their foreheads, you will find what? You will find a mark of their sajdigah. min athar as-sujud, because they're in sujud so long. ذَلِكَ مَثَلُهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاتِ. This is how we have described them in the Tawrat. Imagine the Quran is saying these Sahaba are so special. We have spoken of them in other holy books. In other holy books, we said that there's a messenger going to come. He's going to be riding a camel. These are his Sahaba. These are his companions. So the Quran is speaking highly of these companions. Yes, in our school of thought, we don't assume that everyone who followed the Prophet around is a Sahabi. We assume that the people who actually followed the Prophet are Sahabi. But whoever this circle is, big or small, the Quran is speaking so highly of them. ذَلِكَ مَثَلُهُمْ فِي التَّوْرَاتِ. We spoke about them in other holy books. Okay, what about Injil? وَمَثَلُهُمْ فِي الْإِنْجِيلِ. And the way we have described them in the Injil is what? Is that they are like a plant and a seed that is planted in the ground. Before you know it, it is growing and it becomes hard. It becomes solid. You know, when you plant something, initially, the first couple days, first couple months, it's weak. The Quran says the Sahaba of the Prophet were such that they grew very quickly. They became solid very quickly. The kuffar used to look at these guys and say, these guys are nobodies. But they were so firm. Before they knew it, they turned into a thing. Before they knew it, the Prophet was in Mecca, and the Battle of Badr was happening. What is this about? And the Quran says, لِيَغِيظَ بِهِمُ الْكُفَّارِ. We did this so that we would anger the kuffar and mushrikeen. To remind them that you think these guys are powerless. In fact, they are very powerful. Who is speaking so highly of the Sahaba of the Prophet? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking highly of the Sahaba of the Prophet. And this is a little bit of a shortcoming that you and I have, that when it comes to the lives of the Sahaba of the Prophet, we usually don't spend a lot of time on it. And can I dare even say when it comes to the life of the Prophet himself a little bit? We don't dedicate that time. And that is inshallah something that we aim to, inshallah address. We as followers of Ahlul Bayt should know all the details of the life of the Prophets. If Ali ibn Abi Talib says, أَنَا عَبْدٌ مِّنْ عَبِيدِ Muhammad, I'm one of the slaves of Muhammad, then if I know about the life of this Imam, I need to know about the life of who? I need to know about the life of our beloved Prophet Muhammadin al-Mustafa salawatullahi alayhi. And so inshallah, as we discuss the life of Abudhar, and I want to inshallah transition into his life now, this inshallah will be a little bit of a beginning for us, that as we continue, we get into the lives of the Sahaba of the Prophet one by one, and we get into the life of the Prophet himself, inshallah. Abudhar, amongst the Sahaba of the Prophet, of course, had a very special status. Abudhar and Salman, they had a lot of similarities between them, almost like brothers. In reality, they actually became brothers. So how is that possible? Salman, as we will discuss tomorrow, he didn't even come from around this area. Yes, Salman didn't even come from Arabia. He came from what at that time was Persia. And Abu Dhar, he came from not even Mecca. He came from another area. It was called Wadi al-Sakhra. And that is where his tribe used to live. But why do we say these two are brothers? Because according to some narrations, when the Prophet came to Medina and he was performing this Aqd al-Ukhuwa, this treaty of brotherhood, where the Prophet took individuals from Muhajirin and Ansar and said, you're the brother of this person. You're the brother of this person. And on the day of judgment, you do shafa'ah for this person, and he will do shafa'ah for you. This is one of those big steps that the Prophet took that brought unity amongst this ummah. Who did he put together? He put Abu Dhar and Salman together. And he told Abu Dhar, he said, Abu Dhar, you are to always listen to Salman. Why did he say this? And why didn't he say it the other way around? Is a discussion we will discuss a little bit more tomorrow night. But Abu Dhar and Salman, from the very beginning, they are tied to one another. Then you find in hadith, the Prophet tells his companions, he says, I have been ordered to love certain companions of mine. God has told me to love certain individuals. And they asked the Prophet, they said, Ya Rasulullah, who are these individuals that you are ordered to love? And he mentioned four, and amongst them, Salman and Abu Dhar. Every step of the way you go, it's almost as if they are together. You move a little bit further, they say on the day of judgment, when they call the hawariyun of every prophet and every imam, the close companions of every prophet and every imam, when it comes to our prophet, they call the hawariyun of our prophet. Who stands up? A number stand up, amongst them Abudhar and Salman. And interestingly enough, both Abudhar and Salman were not even with the Prophet when the Prophet was in Mecca. They joined the Prophet a little bit later. So as we discuss tomorrow, Salman joined the Prophet when the Prophet went to Medina. Abudhar, he became a Muslim, but he wasn't with the Prophet. He also didn't have the opportunity to be with the Prophet until the Prophet went to Medina, and that's when he joined the Prophet. All these similarities you find between Abudhar and Salman. Then you find that they were amongst the small group of individuals that when these days and nights of Fatimiyyah came up, and the issue of Khilafah came up, and the forcing to get the bay'ah from our perspective came up, that amongst those small group of individuals who gathered in the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib to oppose what the government at that time was doing was none but Abudhar and Salman. And amongst those small group of people who made it to praying and doing the tashyi' of the body of Lady Fatimah Zahra were who? Were Abudhar and Salman. It was a very small group. In history, less than 20 people showed up for this tashyi', partially because this was part of the wasiyah of our mother. This is what she said, and this has many theological implications. I don't want to go into that right now. But the small group of people who made it there to do tashyi' of the body were who? Salman and Abudhar, both of them were part of that group. This is the type of status that they have. So who was Abudhar al-Ghifari? Abudhar, this was the kunya that they had given to him. His name was Jundab ibn Janada. They had given him the title Abu Dhar because he had a son by the name of Dhar. Abu Dhar means the father of Dhar. And his wife was called Dhar, the mother of Dhar. And he belonged to a tribe known as the tribe of Ghifar. Many times people will pronounce the name as Abu Dhar al-Ghaffari or Ghafari. The correct pronunciation is Abu Dhar al-Ghifari, because his tribe was the tribe of Ghifar. The tribe of Ghifar, they lived in an area between Mecca and Medina. Mecca in the south, Medina in the north. On your way towards Medina, you will come across a place where this tribe of Ghifar lives. We'll come back to the tribe of Ghifar because they, in fact, were a tribe who were not known for the best of things. They actually had certain customs that were not so, so nice and so wonderful. And of course, they changed after Abu Dhar went back to them. So Abu Dhar comes from this tribe, and he is living in this place between Mecca and Medina. This is where the story of Abu Dhar begins, because he slowly starts to hear that this man has come to Mecca, and they say he's a messenger. They say he has the word of God. The way they say he can perform miracles, all this wonderful stuff. So Abu Dhar turns to his brother Unais. He says, Unais, I need you to go to Mecca and inquire about this man. Tell me, what is it that he believes? What is it that he's talking about? Is he really a messenger? Is he not? All of these things. So Unais starts to make his way towards Mecca. He comes into Mecca. He sees the Prophet, spends time with the Prophet. He comes back to where Abu Dhar is, to the tribe of Ghifar. Abu Dhar asked him, he said, did you see Muhammad? Did you see this man? He said, yeah, I saw him. He said, tell me what you thought of him. He said, listen, he orders us to do good things. He tells us to be a good person, to not drink, yes, to not have forbidden relationships, to not steal. He has this book. It rhymes when he recites of it, but it's not poetry. It has this nice rhythm to it, but it's not poetry either. So overall, he seems like a good person. And Abu Dhar said, listen, you didn't extinguish this fire that was burning inside of me. In other words, you didn't come back with enough. I have to go myself. And the narration says, now Abu Dhar got up and he started to make his way almost from Medina all the way to Mecca. He didn't live in Medina at that time. He was outside of Medina with his tribe in another area. He starts to make his way now towards Mecca. And the narration says he took a little bit of water with himself, a little bit of bread, starts to make his way towards Mecca. He enters into Mecca, and now he's looking around to see who is this Muhammad and what is he trying to say, and is he really the messenger of God, or what's going on with that? Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil faraja. Abudhar comes into Mecca. You have to understand the circumstances of Mecca. Abudhar was the 5th person to embrace Islam. There's no ummah. There's no, this is the prophets. There's none of that. And in fact, if you come in and say, I'm looking for Muhammad, Quraysh is going to have a problem with you. So Abu Dhar makes his way into Mecca, and secretly he starts to look around for the Prophet. But he can't find him. He goes and he sits in Masjid al-Haram the first day. And he sits there and no, he's not here. Where is he? Where does he preach? Can't find him. And while he is in the masjid, a person comes and sees this person. He's sitting in the masjid. He has nowhere to stay. And who was that? None but Ali ibn Abi Talib. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad wa ajil farajah. The first imam comes to him. He says, what are you doing here? He says, I've come from the tribe of Ghifar. I'm visiting Mecca. But he doesn't speak of what his intentions are, because you can't speak of your intentions. This is not Medina where everyone knows this is the Prophet and he has a government. No, it's not, none of that. You speak of the Prophet, you might lose your life. That's as simple as that. So he doesn't tell him why he has come to Mecca. But Ali ibn Abi Talib says, well, you've come here, you're visiting, you come to our place. You stay with us. So he comes and he sleeps in the house of Ali ibn Abi Talib, gives him food, gives him the hospitality. The whole day and night, they don't speak of his intention. The next day, Abu Dhar heads out, goes back to the masjid. He sits there again. Prophet doesn't show up again. Again, Ali ibn Abi Talib comes back, sees him the second day. The narration says he turned to Abu Dhar and he said this beautiful line. He said, it's not good for a man not to know where his home is. Meaning that this second night, you already know you have a place with me. Why are you acting like you have nowhere to stay? You come stay with me. So then he took him back. Again this night, didn't speak of anything. The third day came around, and Ali ibn Abi Talib asked him, he said, tell me, why have you come to Mecca? You built some trust together. You tell me why you've come to Mecca. He said, I've come to Mecca to learn about this man that they call Muhammad. I don't know. Is he a messenger? Is he not? Can he prove it? And Ali ibn Abi Talib told him, yes, he's the real deal. He's a messenger. He said, do you know where I can meet him? He said, yes, I know where he is. And I will walk out of the house today. And as I am walking in the alleys of Mecca, you follow me. And if I feel like it's safe, I will enter into the house in which the Prophet is. And if I feel like it is not safe, then I will act like I left the house for some other reason, and I'll just, make my way somewhere else. This is the circumstances that Abu Dhar and Ali ibn Abi Talib are functioning in. They find out why you're there and you're killed. So then Ali ibn Abi Talib starts to make his way through the alleys of Mecca, and at one point he feels like it's safe enough to enter into this house. He enters into the house, and Abu Dhar enters into the house as well, and that is where he finally gets his chance and opportunity to meet the Prophet. And he gives his salam to the Prophet, and the Prophet responds to him with salam. And this was such a special thing. They say Abu Dhar was the first one to say salam to the Prophet in the way that Muslims used to say salam to one another. This is at the very beginning. So he sat down with the Prophet, and the Prophet explained to him of the verses of the Quran, and right there and then he took his shahada. And he says, when I took my shahada, then I saw the Prophet smiled, and he was so happy. This is how Abu Dhar now embraces the religion of Islam. Now he wants to get up and leave. And as he is leaving, the Prophet tells him, he says, when you head out of this door, do not speak at all of your faith, because it might get very dangerous for you. He was telling him because he was trying to tell him, you have to protect yourself, be careful. But Abu Dhar, as we will discuss, was the type of person, sometimes he couldn't even hold it back. And his faith was so strong, sometimes he just wanted to say it. So the narration says, though the Prophet told him, be careful You don't have to tell anybody right now in Mecca. But as he was heading out, he went out and he couldn't even hold it in. Maybe out of joy, maybe out of the fact that this is such a big deal for him, he called out, he said, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah, salawatullahi wa salamu alayhi. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He called out these things. The people of Quraysh quickly found out and they started to attack him. And the only reason why he was able to make it out alive is because others came and said, listen, his tribe stands at a place where when the tribes of Quraysh are going for business from Mecca to Syria, they have to pass by this tribe. So if you hurt him, his tribe is going to create problems for you. And this is how Abudhar was able to leave. He leaves. The Prophet told him, though you have embraced Islam now, you have to go and bring this message to your own people. Don't stay in Medina. And because of this, he was never, or forgive me, in Mecca. Because of this, he was never with the Prophet when the Prophet was in the city of Mecca. Very beginning, the Prophet is already telling him, you go and spread this message for me. And he went to his people, and all of his tribe now entered into Islam. His mother, his father, everyone entered into Islam. And this is why the Prophet was famously quoted to have said, Al-Ghifar, the tribe of Ghifar, Ghafarallahu laha. May Allah, forgive them. Why? Because they entered into Islam so easily. I sent one Abudhar and this whole tribe did what? This whole tribe embraced this religion of Islam. So Islam has now entered into the heart of Abudhar. As days go by, his faith becomes stronger and stronger. But amongst the characteristics that Abudhar had, that pretty much nobody else had, was two main things. The first characteristic that Abudhar had, and he had it for a very good reason, and you will see as we continue with the discussion, was number one, he was the type of person who would always speak the truth. And the Prophet said in multiple narrations that there is no one amongst my ummah who is more truthful than Abudhar. Only Abudhar is the one who will always speak the truth. Why did the Prophet emphasize this so much? We'll get to it later. That was number one. Number two, Abudhar was extremely abstinent. He lived a very simple and modest life. And they used to come to him during the time of the Prophet, even after the time of the Prophet, because after the time of the Prophet, being a Sahabi and having seen the Prophet was a very high status. If you were a Sahabi, you were considered special. So many used to come to him and used to say, listen, if you wanted to live a better life, you could. It's available to you. Why don't you have a house or this, that, enjoy life. And he used to say, listen, at the end of the day, a little bit of water and milk I need, and I need a little bit of bread for my life to go on. That's all I need. Yes, I can go crazy and have everything, or I can live a simple and modest life. I'd rather do this. And they used to ask him, oh Abu Dhar, what do you own? What do you have? And he used to say, I have some good deeds. And they used to say, Abu Dhar, now we're not talking about the good deeds. Tell us of gold and silver what you own. Tell us of wealth, hard assets. Tell us what you own. And he said, listen, whatever money I get, if I get it in the morning, by the nighttime, I've spent it on my basic necessities. And if I get it at nighttime, by the morning, I spent it on my basic necessities. Anything extra that I get, I put it in my treasure chest. They said, Abu Dhar, what treasure chest are you talking about? He said, yes, the Prophet taught us that every mu'min has a treasure chest. He puts his valuable things there. He keeps them there for later. He said, what treasure chest are you talking about? He said, my Habib, my friend, my Prophet, he told me that the treasure chest of every believer is his grave. He puts his good deeds over there. He keeps his good deeds for later. He stores them for later because there's going to come another time where he's really going to need his good deeds. Any extra money I get, that's where I put it, meaning I do infaq with it. I send it forward because that's where I'm going to use it. So the zuhd of Abu Dhar and this fact that he spoke the truth were two things that were very special in the character of Abu Dhar. And he continued to elevate in faith such that the Prophet used to show affection to Abu Dhar. And Abu Dhar used to show affection back to the Prophet. And one narration says that one day the Prophet was standing and he was speaking to an individual. And this individual was none but Jibreel. Because the narrations say, and Shia and Sunni have narrated this, that at times Jibreel would take on the appearance of one of the companions of the Prophet. And he would approach him. Dihya al-Kalbi is an individual. They say in history when Jibreel wanted to show up, he would show up as Dihya al-Kalbi. He was another one of the companions of the Prophet. But Jibreel would show up in this way so that the average person would not know. It's like the Prophet is talking to any of his companions. The narration says one day Dihya al-Kalbi was speaking to the Prophet. But this was not Dihya. This was Jibreel who was speaking to him. And the narration says that Abu Dhar came from far away. And when he saw the Prophet and Dihya al-Kalbi, who is in reality Jibreel talking, but he didn't know, he went in his different direction. Because he said, I don't want to bother the Prophet if he's busy talking. So he went his different way. And the narration says that Jibreel turned to the Prophet and said, oh, this was Abu Dhar. This is Abu Dhar who came. Imagine you're famous with the angels. You're more famous with the angels than you are with the people on earth. Jibreel said, this is Abu Dhar who came. I wish he had come and given salam to me. Because if he had given salam to me, he would have heard my salam back to him. This is the status that he has. And then Jibreel turned to the Prophet and said, Ya Rasulullah, Abu Dhar has this dua, it's so beautiful, and he does it so beautifully, it's well known amongst the angels of the heavens. The angels know what this dua is, it's famous. So then he left. The Prophet came to Abu Dhar and said, why didn't you come? He said, you were talking, I didn't want to bother you. He said, this was Jibreel. And he told me if you had come and given him salam, he would have, responded to your salam. And Abu Dhar felt a bit down about this. I wish I knew this was Jibreel. But then the Prophet told him, he said, Abu Dhar, apparently you have this dua. You do it so beautifully. The angels in heaven know about it. It's a famous dua in the angels' heaven. So what is this dua that you recite? He said, this is the dua that I recite. And it's a very beautiful dua. He said, Allahumma inni as'aluka al-amna wal-iman. Oh Allah, I ask you for protection and faith. وَالتَّصْدِيقَ بِنَبِيِّكَ, and that I have faith in your Prophet. وَالْعَافِيَةَ مِنْ جَمِيعِ الْبَلَاءِ, and that you protect me from all of the calamities. وَالشُّكْرَ عَلَى الْعَافِيَةِ, and that when you protect me from all of these calamities, that I am thankful of what you have done. Protect me from all of them, but also teach me to thank you when you have protected me from all of these calamities. وَالْغِرَى عَنْ شِرَارِ النَّاسِ, and that you protect me from people who are problematic. And the Prophet said, this dua is famous. The angels know this dua of yours because of how beautifully you recite this dua. This relationship between Abu Dhar and the Prophet continued and continued. They say in one of the battles of the Prophet, the Battle of Tabuk, this was a battle where the Muslimin had to leave Medina and go northwest because they were going to stop the Roman army from coming. And on the way, there were people who fell behind from the army. And amongst those who fell behind was none but Abu Dhar. They came to the Prophet, they said, Ya Rasulullah, Abu Dhar has fell behind, he's not with us anymore. And the Prophet said, that's fine, let Abu Dhar come on his own. And there was a reason why he was saying this. So then they saw someone coming from far away, and the Prophet heard that someone is approaching us. The Prophet raised his hands. He said, Oh Allah, let it be Abu Dhar. Imagine how beloved you are by the Prophet. When someone's coming, he says, I hope it's this person. I hope it's Abu Dhar that's coming. He raised his hand and said, Ya Allah, let it be Abu Dhar. Came closer, they confirmed, this is Abu Dhar. And then the Prophet said beautifully, he said, this is Abu Dhar. He lives by himself, he lives alone, he will die alone, he will be resurrected alone, he will enter into heaven alone as well. Abu Dhar, because of the truth that he used to speak, everyone would just leave him alone all the time. It's by himself, isolated. He came closer. The Prophet turned to his companion and said, Abu Dhar is thirsty. Get him water. They went to get the water. They brought the water. They find Abu Dhar has water in his hands. They said, Abudhar, you have water. You didn't drink your own water. You fell behind. You didn't drink your own water. He said, yes, I had water. As I was coming on my way, I found this really nice spring and I wanted to drink from it. But as I wanted to drink from it, I thought to myself that maybe the Prophet hasn't drank yet. So I took from this water and I brought it with me, so that if I see the Prophet and he hasn't drinking yet, and he hasn't, sipped his water yet, that I would be able to provide water to him. This was the relationship that the Prophet and Abudhar had. And of course, you can imagine how difficult it was, those moments when the Prophet was taking his final breaths, and now things were moving on. Recite salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. The moment the Prophet passed away, the masa'ib of the Ahlul Bayt began. And of course, we know the issue of Fatimiyyah came up. And Ali ibn Abi Talib found himself in a position where only a small amount of individuals gathered with him in that house. And amongst them, of course, was none but Abudhar himself. This was the stance he had with the first and second caliph. But the real problems that Abudhar has started to have was with the third caliph. Because by the time of the third caliph, this is almost 20 years after the Prophet has passed away. And the message and the legacy of the Prophet, Abudhar feels like people are changing it now. And now he feels like he has this role that he has to play. The Prophet said, you're the most truthful who will ever speak from my ummah. So now if I know the truth, I have to speak of it. I have to tell people how the Prophet used to do things, how this Khalifa is doing things. So what happened? He was living in Medina, and slowly he saw the way Uthman was dealing with Baytul Mal. This is a discussion for another time. I don't want to go into it too much. But there is a lot of discussion as to one of the major shortcomings of Uthman was that he was generous with the wealth of the Muslimin where he was not allowed to be generous. You can give from your own wealth, that's not a problem. But the wealth of others, you can't give from. Yes? It's easy for me to sit up here and say, this brother will give you money, don't worry, that's easy. In Farsi we have this saying, like he gives from the money of the caliph. He doesn't give from his own money, he gives from someone else's money. Inshallah, this brother will take care of it. That's easy. Giving from your own wealth. Uthman had this issue, and it's a discussion for another time. And because of this, every step of the way, Abudhar used to come to Uthman and say, what you're doing is wrong. And he used to recite verses of the Quran in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there are those, they gather gold and silver around themselves, but when it comes time for infaq and paying their dues, they won't do it. And he used to recite these verses as it relates to Uthman. And this happened on a number of occasions. The narration says one time he came to Uthman, and Uthman had in front of him 100,000 dirhams. A dirham was a coin, it was made of silver. It was used as a currency at that time. And he looked at these coins and he knew this is not being divided the way it needs to be divided. He turned to Uthman, he said, Uthman, is 100,000 dirhams more or 4 little dinars? Dinar, of course, is made of gold, but compared to 100,000, it's nothing. He said, which one is more? 4 dinars or 100,000 dirhams? And Uthman said, of course, 100,000 dirhams is a lot more. He said, but why do you ask this question? He said, Uthman, what are you doing with this money? You're dividing it properly? Uthman didn't respond properly to him. He said, Uthman, you remember that day we were with the Prophet? We came across the Prophet, we saw the Prophet's not as happy as he usually is. And we gave salam to him, and the only thing he did, he responded to our salam, and that's it. He was mentally occupied. He was busy with something, and something was worrying him. Something was concerning him. And we saw him the next day, he was happy. You remember you and I asked him, we said, Ya Rasulullah, what is it that is bothering you? What is it that's concerning you? What is it that's on your mind? He said, yes, I remember that day. So what did the Prophet say? The Prophet said that day, that night, he had 4 dinars from Baytul Mal that he had not divided yet amongst people. And because of that, it's almost as if he couldn't get sleep at night. And because of that, he felt so concerned when he went to sleep at night. And then the next day we asked him, and he said the next day he had the opportunity to divide these dinars. And because of that, he was well rested and he was happy now. He said, Uthman, this is how the Prophet used to deal with Baytul Mal. And you're sitting there and thousands of dirhams is just in front of you and you're doing as you wish with it. This interaction, this confrontation, multiple times this used to happen with the third caliph and Abudhar. So much so, it came to a point where Uthman said, you know what, enough is enough. I can't deal with you, Abudhar, anymore. You talk too much, you speak the truth too much. Because no one could say Abudhar was not speaking the truth. Why? Because the Prophet already had said multiple times that there is no one that the sky has put itself above of, and there is no one who's walked on earth who is more truthful than Abudhar. Prophet had already said this multiple times. So every time Uthman used to say, what are you saying? What are these lies? Ali ibn Abi Talib used to remind the caliph of this hadith of the Prophet. This is Abudhar. This is Siddiq hadhihi al-ummah, the one who speaks and he is truthful when he speaks. So at one point Uthman said, listen, I don't know what to do with you anymore. You have to leave. And in the narrations there is words and terminology and vocabulary that's used that is derogatory. I am skipping all over all of that. He said, you old man, you have to leave. So he said, well, what do you want to do? He said, I am going to exile you to the land of Sham. And he forced Abu Dhar out of Medina to the land of Sham. Okay. But the problem, of course, was the land of Sham had a king of its own. That king was none but Muawiyah. Muawiyah was in charge of Sham. He was in charge of that part of the world. And part of the reason why he was in charge of that part of the world was because the second caliph had put him in that position, had granted him the governance of that area. And when people used to come to Uthman and used to say, listen, Uthman, this Muawiyah, he's living like a king. He used to say, listen, Umar put him there. Who am I to remove someone that the second caliph put into power? No. So he came to Sham. Muawiyah is living like a king. And this is something that even in other schools of thought, there is a clear understanding with regards to it. That Muawiyah did not even look at this thing as khilafah, I'm representing the Prophet. No, forget about this stuff. I'm a king, I'm in power, I eat a lot, I engage in all forms of pleasure. This is what he used to say. And I do as I wish, and I built palaces for myself. And amongst those palaces that he built for himself was a palace called the Green Palace, because it had rocks and stones built into it that had this green color. And this is, Muawiyah is also Sahabi of the Prophet, saw the Prophet. So Abu Dhar came to Sham, started creating problems there. And every day he used to go out in Sham and he used to speak against Muawiyah and the lifestyle that he had put together. And he used to remind people, listen, when the Prophet was around, this is how he used to live. This is not how he used to live. He created so many problems there. Muawiyah wrote a letter where? Back to Medina. He said, come and get your guy. Come and take Abu Dhar, because if he stays here any longer, then all of the people of Sham will be against you, Uthman. So then Uthman said, right, send him back. And send him on an animal that doesn't have a saddle, because he was pressuring Abu Dhar. So Abu Dhar comes back to Medina this time. And again, the confrontations continue over and over again. The wealth, the extravagance. And here is the most truthful man who's ever walked on earth. No one can say you're lying. No one can say what you're saying is not true. So these confrontations continued over and over again, until at one point Uthman said, listen, I don't know what to do with you anymore. He said, now you have to leave Medina again. He said, where should I go? Should I go to Sham? He said, no, you already went to Sham. And they don't want you there. He said, should I go to Iraq? He said, no, Iraq people will gather around you. I go to Egypt? He said, no, Egypt you can't go either. And this time he exiled Abu Dhar to this land known as the land of Rabada, which is literally in the middle of nowhere. Desert. So you have to go and live there. Because they couldn't take the truth that Abu Dhar was speaking. This is the lesson for you and I. The truth that Abu Dhar carried with himself. When a person lives with truth and with purpose, the difficulties of life become easy for him to take. But when he doesn't have truth and purpose behind him, the smallest thing becomes an obstacle for him. This is Abudhar. Why is it so easy for Abudhar? Because he carries the truth with him. And he stands up for the truth. So then he told him, you have to go to Rabada. And you have to take your family with you. And Abudhar is now going to head out. But the caliph said, not only does he have to leave, nobody has the right to come and say farewell to Abudhar. You can't bid farewell to him. And of course, the only person who disregarded this command was Ali ibn Abi Talib and his family. Imagine now, Abudhar is leaving and Ali ibn Abi Talib and his family gathered around him. And the narration says at this point, some of the relatives of the first Imam, they started to cry. Because they see the Sahabi of the Prophet, this person who's supposed to be held at this high position, now they're just sending him here and there. He's homeless. He doesn't have a place to go. They don't even, disrespectful towards him. Putting him down, trying to humiliate him. And one by one, the relatives of Ahlul Bayt, they used to come and they used to say goodbye to Abu Dhar. But all of this, while the caliph didn't want any of this. And the narration says, Aqil, the brother of Ali ibn Abi Talib, came and he said goodbye. And Ammar Yasir came and he said goodbye. And some other companions as well, they came and they said goodbye. And each one of them, you could feel the pain when they were speaking to Abu Dhar. They said, it pains us that you're in this position. But Abu Dhar, know that you're only in this position because you are speaking the truth. And hence be patient, because the Prophet had told you that there's going to come a time where people pressure you the way I am pressuring my fingers between my hand. And you asked the Prophet, you said, Ya Rasulullah, will I be on the right path? And he said, yes, you will be on the right path. And you said, I don't care then. This is what you said, Abu Dhar. So be patient. And they say Abu Dhar made his way into the middle of this desert. Imagine the loneliness of this Sahabi of the Prophet. We speak about Sahaba, Bismillah. Abu Dhar is Sahaba. This is Sahabi of the Prophet. Abu Dhar goes to Rabada in the middle of nowhere. You can imagine when you live in the desert, the heat of the day, the cold of the night. And the narration in history says that he lost his son during this time as well. And he stood there upon the grave of his son that he buried himself. And he said, my son, I'm not upset for you. You have left this world. And he made this beautiful dua. He said, oh Allah, I am the father of this child. I lift all of my rights from this child. All of the responsibilities that this child had as it relates to me, I have forgiven him. Oh Allah, you have more rights on me than I have on this child. So you lift your rights from me. And you be forgiving towards me. This is the loneliness of Abu Dhar. And every now and then he used to come for Hajj. And when he used to come for Hajj, people used to ask him, say, who are you? He used to say, Jundab ibn Janada. And people would gather around him. Because they knew who Abu Dhar was. They would gather around him. And because of this, Abu Dhar, he would speak every now and then and give them some words of wisdom. Recite a salawat, please. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. He used to give them some words of wisdom. And amongst these words of wisdom was this. He said that he turned to the people. He said, people, everyone who goes on a trip prepares for himself a little bit of a sustenance. Something that he's going to take with him. Yes? A little bit of water, a little bit of food. This trip is not an easy trip. He said, you all need to prepare as well. He said, Abu Dhar, what do you mean? We're not going on any trip. He said, no, you're going on a trip. Prepare for the trip of Akhirah. They said, how do we prepare, Abu Dhar? He said, at least do some of these things. He said, at least fast on a hot day. Fast on a hot day. Let this be your, that thing that you take with you on this journey. Go for Hajj when it might be difficult. Take this as your, what you take with you. Give for charity. Take that with you on your trip. And he used to constantly remind people of what they can bring to the table. He said, give some money to the orphans. Maybe that's what you can take with you. Very, different options he put in front of people. And every time he used to go to Hajj, people would gather around him and hear from the words of wisdom of Abu Dhar. Abu Dhar lives his life until the final days of his life come in the year 31 after Hijrah. This is now 20 years after the Prophet has left this world. Yes? Abu Dhar, the narration says, he was lonely and just himself and his wife in Rabada. You speak about the loneliness of Ahlul Bayt. This is the loneliness of the companions of Ahlul Bayt. He's alone in the desert of Rabada. And one point came where it was clear that now his life is coming to an end. And that he's not going to be living any further. And his wife turned towards him and he said, Abu Dhar, if you die right now, what am I going to do? How would I bury you? And Abu Dhar said, my wife, don't worry, the Prophet of Allah has promised me that when the time comes for me to leave this world, that a group of people will come, they'll do my dafn and kafn for you. Recite salawat, please. There'll come a group of people, they'll come and do the kafn and dafn for you. And she said, but I look around, I don't see anybody. And the narration continues and says, he said that, listen, if the Prophet has given me this promise, then my Habib, my friend, my beloved one, he gave me this promise, it's going to happen. So as he was lying there, his wife looked around and saw from far away there's a group of people approaching. And as they were approaching, said, I see some people. Abu Dhar said, I told you this is going to happen. These group of people approached, and this lady came to them, the wife of Abu Dhar came to them and said, there's an old man here. He's leaving this world, and I need your help for the kafn and dafn. And they said, who is this? They said, this is Abu Dhar. The companion of the Prophet is leaving this world. And the narration says that they all took this deep breath of sorrow. This is the companion of the Prophet. This is Sahaba of the Prophet in the middle of the desert. So the narration says this group came, and according to one narration, Malik Ashtar was also part of this group as well. And Abu Dhar took his final breaths, and they did the kafn and the dafn of Abu Dhar, and they stood there and they did the prayer on the body of Abu Dhar. And this is how this well-known friend of the Prophet, this companion of the Prophet, this man who went through the thick and thin with the Prophet, this is the final days of the life of Abu Dhar. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that we are amongst those who make someone like Abu Dhar proud on the day of judgments. If we can dim the lights, we'll take our hearts, brothers and sisters, to the city of Medina. If this is the loneliness of someone like Abu Dhar, if the wife of Abu Dhar, if the spouse of Abu Dhar finds herself in the final moments of her life, finds herself in a difficult position, and she doesn't know how to bury the body of Abu Dhar in these moments, and she doesn't have the strength to even put this body under the ground, and she doesn't find the strength to pour dirt on the body of Abu Dhar, then how do you think Ali ibn Abi Talib found the strength, the power to carry the body of Fatimah az-Zahra? What went through the heart of Ali ibn Abi Talib? Imagine how difficult these moments have been for Ali ibn Abi Talib. This house of the Ahlul Bayt that was supposed to be respected, they were supposed to be dignified, they were supposed to be honored. The moment the Prophet left this world, all of a sudden, everything, all of the oppression of the world now made its way towards the Ahlul Bayt. The narration says Fatimah az-Zahra was by the deathbed of her father. And in those moments, they say that she was crying and crying heavily. And at one point, the Prophet whispered something into the ears of Fatima. And the narration says all of a sudden, then she started to smile and she calmed down a little bit. They asked her, Fatima, what did your father say? She said, I can't tell you right now. A while after the Prophet passed away, they asked her, they said, Fatima, what did the Prophet tell you? That you went from crying to be able to smile in those moments. What did the Prophet share with you in those final moments? And Fatima said, you know what he shared with me? He told me that amongst all of his Ahlul Bayt, I will be the first one who will quickly join him in heaven. He told me that I'm not going to have to live in this society of yours for too long. What is Fatima saying? Fatima is saying, I'm going to be martyred very soon. I'm going to be leaving this world very soon. Imagine those final moments as Ali ibn Abi Talib, Hassan and Hussein, Zainab, Kulthum, they've all gathered around the body of Fatima Zahra. The narration says in those moments Fatima started to cry. And Ali ibn Abi Talib asked her and said, why is it that you're crying? Is the pain too much? Is the difficulty too much? And Fatima said, no, I don't cry for myself. I cry because I know what's going to happen to you after I'm gone. I know the pain and difficulty you have to deal with after I'm gone. Imagine these children have all gathered around the body of Fatima Zahra. The narration says in those moments she was fainting and coming back, fainting and coming back. The narration says as at one point she then turned to Ali ibn Abi Talib. She said, this is my father. The Prophet is now giving his salam. The Prophet is telling me to go to him quickly, to go to him faster because they are waiting for me in heaven. Imagine what Ali experienced in these moments. He sees his wife in front of him. He sees the mother of his children in front of him. But this mother has been through so much pain, she'd rather leave this world than stay in this world. How much oppression and difficulty did Fatima go through? How many masa'ib did Fatima go through that when she sees the next world, she'd rather go to the next world than stay in this world? The narration says she then turned to Ali ibn Abi Talib and she said, this is Jibreel and he is calling me. And then she closed her eyes and he said, Assalamu alayka ya qabid al-arwah. Oh, the angel who comes to take the souls of the believers, my salam goes to you. And now Malik al-Maut has entered to take the soul of Fatima, until those moments come where the narration says, then she closed her eyes and life left her arms and her legs. And now the lifeless body of Fatima now lies in the presence of Ali and Fatima and Hassan and Hussein. Then Ali ibn Abi Talib narrates this part of the story for us. He says, when this happened, then I didn't know what to do. These women and children, they were crying. I asked them to give me an opportunity to do the kafan of the body of Fatima. When I did the kafan and I wanted to tie the final knot of this kafan, then I turned to them. I said, Ya Zainab, Ya Kulthum, Ya Hassan, Ya Hussein, come and say your final goodbye to your mother, because this is the final moment that you will see your mother. This is the final moment that you will see the face of Fatima. The next time you will see her is in heaven. Imagine these orphans come and sit by the body of Fatima Zahra. Each one of them might be speaking in their own way with their mother. I don't know if you've experienced or heard of someone losing their mother. What is there closer than losing someone as close to you as your mother? These women and children came and gathered around the body of Fatima as Ali slowly takes the body of Fatima towards the graveyard. And we tell Ali on this day, Ya Ali, you're worried about Zainab, you're worried about Hassan, you're worried about Hussein on a day like this. Ya Ali, where are you going to be on the 10th of Muharram? When those moments come when Zainab doesn't even have the chance to sit by the body of Hussein. When those moments come where Zainab cannot even kiss the body of Hussein and say her farewell. Where are you going to be in those moments when Zainab will run out of the tent and she will call out, Wa Muhammadah, Wa Aliyah, Hada Husaynun bil-Ara. O Prophet of Allah, this is Hussein, this is your grandson. His body is lying in the middle of the desert. Murammalun bid-dima. His body is covered with blood. They killed him and they didn't even give him water in those final moments. Ya Ali, what will you do on the 10th of Muharram when they come and they set fire to the tents of Ahlul Bayt? And this daughter of yours is running from left and right, just trying to gather these orphans, just trying to gather these women and children under a half-burnt tent. Who is going to be there to console the heart of Zainab on that day? Allah la'natullah ala al-qawm al-zalimin. وَسَيَعْلَمُ الَّذِينَ ظَلَمُوا أَيَّ مُنْقَلَبٍ يَنْقَلِبُونَ. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He makes us amongst those who are amongst the true followers of the Ahlul Bayt, insha'Allah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of those who are going through difficulty, pain, and calamities, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frees them from their difficulties and pains, inshaAllah. We pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that all of those who work with sincerity, with ikhlas, for the cause of Islam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala blesses their efforts and prolongs their lives, inshaAllah. And finally, last but not least, we pray to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that He hastens the return of our beloved 12th Imam. Let us take a moment to recite Surah Al-Fatiha for all of your marhumin and marhumat, especially the marhumin and marhumat of the sponsors of tonight's program. Rahimallah man qara'a Surah Al-Fatihati ma'a as-salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
Ya Hussein.
ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا، لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا، لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا، لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایسا بدلا ہے مدینہ اپنا حق مانگ رہی ہوں، غاصب سے کلمہ گو کرسی نشیں ہے اور میں کب سے کھڑی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا، لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا، لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. پوچھا ہے در نے بتا کیا کیا مسجد میں ہوا، روکے بس اتنا کہا، کبھی دیواروں کو تھاما، کبھی میں خاک پہ بیٹھی ہوں تھک کر، کبھی بیٹوں نے سنبھالا، کبھی راستے میں گری ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا، لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا، لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. جتنے دکھ میں نے سہے گر یہ دن پر بھی پڑے، وہ سیاہ رات بنے، یہی دکھ کم تو نہیں ہے، کس قدر تنہا مدینے میں ہوئی ہوں، کوئی سنتا ہی نہیں ہے، کہ میں کیا بول رہی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا. لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے میں آ کے زہرا. لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. وہ تو کم سن ہے ابھی دور ہے شام سے بھی. سہ نہ پائے گی کبھی. مجھ سے زینب نے یہ پوچھا کہاں جاتی ہو بتاؤ اے اماں. میں نے زینب سے چھپایا کہ میں دربار چلی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا. لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا. لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایسے خاموش ہو کیوں کہنا چاہو جو کہو. اماں کچھ تو بولو. رو کے بولی بیٹوں سے ساتھ بہنوں کا نبھانا. کربل میں ننگے سر کیسے چلیں گی بس یہی سوچ رہی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا. لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا. لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. تربت بنت نبی دیکھے اکبر جو کبھی. تربت بنت علی تربت بنت نبی دیکھے اکبر جو کبھی. مجھ کو لگتا ہے یہی اس کا مہدی کہتا ہے. منتقم بن کے مدینے زہرا کا جلد آؤں گا میں لوگوں. دور حاضر کا علی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا. لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں. ایک تحریر اٹھائے بولی دربار میں آ کر زہرا. لوگوں میں بنت نبی ہوں.
صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. السلام عليك يا رسول الله. السلام عليك يا حبيب الله. السلام عليك يا أمير المؤمنين علي بن أبي طالب. السلام عليك يا فاطمة الزهراء سيدة نساء العالمين. السلام عليك يا حسن المجتبى. السلام عليك يا أبا عبد الله ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام على 9 المعصومين من ذرية الحسين. السلام عليك يا صاحب العصر والزمان. السلام عليك يا خليفة الرحمن. السلام عليك يا إمام الإنس والجان ورحمة الله وبركاته. السلام عليكم يا أهل بيت النبوة جميعا ورحمة الله وبركاته.